Welcome to the 40 to 40 podcast. Join me, your host, John Weiser, as I explore life 40 degrees south of the equator. All right, welcome to episode 11 of the 40 to 40 podcast. I'm very excited to have Matt Felber on with me, who I get to call him Uncle Matt. So thank you, Uncle Matt, for coming on.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, Uncle Matt is notably, he's a father of six. He had his own construction business, and him and his wife also homeschooled. So I wanted to have you on today to get a chance to talk about some of your motivation for homeschooling and also what your experience was doing that.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Let's
And
do it.
so, as you know, the idea behind the podcast, I try to tie in some topic with Argentina somehow. And so, with homeschooling, what I was thinking was essentially, since I've been in Argentina, I've met different types of people who might be interested in homeschooling. So, my own experience is that my wife and I have lived in the northern hemisphere on the East Coast, 40 degrees north, and so. And then she's from 40 degrees south, right? And so what's interesting about this is that if we were to try to live half the year in the United States and half the year in Argentina or something like that, it wouldn't work with the school systems because in Argentina you start school in March and in the United States you start school in September. So it would be very difficult to try to squeeze in a full school year, like going to traditional school. So we were thinking to ourselves, oh, maybe like other international couples like us would be interested in homeschooling because they want to spend some time in each country from each side of the couple, you know. And then the other thing, when we were going down, we had a chance to go and drive through Argentina. So we went down to the bottom of Argentina, the fin de mundo, Ushuaia, and we met a lot of people who were traveling the world with kids. And so I'm assuming they're doing some kind of homeschooling. I'm not sure, you know. And then the other topic that kind of ties homeschooling to Argentina is that right now Argentina does not have much homeschooling at all. But they have this new libertarian president. One thing that he is an advocate of is essentially educational choice. So voucher systems, deciding how you want to educate your children and having the government play a smaller role. So definitely not necessarily a religious reason for homeschooling, but more so just logical governmental reason that the government doesn't need to control how we educate the children, essentially, right? So that was how I'm tying the topic in. And so that's why I wanted to bring you on as somebody who has real life experience with that topic.
Sounds good. Sounds
Awesome.
good.
Awesome. And then, so I think the other thing that I've had some experience in or that I've been learning about is just all the different types of education. So you have like the Montessori schools that are kind of trendy right now. You have the homeschooling. I ran into this guy on a podcast who is using like the Socratic method for teaching children. So he would let kids get in these groups of like 30 kids from ages, I don't know, 8 to 14. And they would have they would do game type situations to learn. And if there was a fight amongst the kids or whatever, the monitor, who was the adult, would come in and say something like, okay, to solve this problem, what do you think would work better, a constitutional republic or pure democracy? And then the kids would go search, like, what does that mean? And then try to apply some solution. And so it's like this Socratic method of learning. It was very interesting, very different than like how we grew up or how I grew up, at least in the classroom setting. You have the STEM schools, the STEAM schools where they throw art in there. And then I also ran into a lady who was she was in Argentina, but she had Norwegian citizenship. So she was able to do a Norwegian remote learning program for her child because
Wow.
he thought he could get better education that way. So just to mention some of the unconventional schooling methods that I'm aware of, at least today we can focus on homeschooling. But my first question for you is essentially why? So why did you and Aunt Lori, why did you guys decide to do homeschooling when I don't think either one of you was homeschooled?
No, actually, we were not. Neither one of us were. Actually, we both went to public schools all the way through high school, as they have in the United States. And then we both went off to a private college or university after that point. And so neither one of us had any history or background in home education. So it was totally new to us. So the why, that's a big question, and it's probably really the most important question because if parents, when they, I mean, it's a big deal to you look at your kids, you want the best for them. Big deal to know why you're going to choose whatever type of education you choose for them, and you want you want to know what their direction is going to be in life, and you want to know what direction you need to go in order to make that happen. I think uh, we saw actually when we both got out of the university, we both wound up teaching in private schools for a while, and having done that, we, you know, your eyes are pretty wide open, and you look at the students that you're teaching, you see what backgrounds they come from, so forth and so on. I mean, we both public education with them. We were also in a private, we taught a private school, and so we saw that, and I mean, and we saw the results of it. I mean, I taught at the high school level, and so at that point, you know, kids are pretty well headed in one direction or another, and we thought to ourselves, okay, what are we seeing? You know, different things from our experience. We thought, okay, what do we want to do? And not to say that anything is bad about, you know, any of the other systems. I mean, they all have their benefits. We see some great results, you know, from different students. We were in Illinois, south of Chicago, and even in Chicago school systems historically have been
Right.
noted for being very bad.
Right.
No one ever has anything to do has anything good to say about it. So they raise the taxes and they spend more money to try to get it better, and they get the same results. So looking at all that, we're just our biggest thing is we want the best for our kids, and every parent wants that.
Right.
So, but yet that. A lot comes into play. I mean, like for example, your situation where you're going to be moving around a lot, you're trying to find something that works. And for us, we were at that time pretty well settled into one location, so we could do a little bit of everything. Actually, before that, I had kind of thought that I was going to be living internationally, and so that's the first time I ever heard of any type of education outside of just a standard, conventional, government system. That's the first time I ever heard of anything like that. And I was kind of heard about, not really looked in deeply, but knew about different systems that were out there for people that traveled, that lived in another country, or parents worked for some type of governmental system where they're all over. So the kids are still there. So it's like, what are we going to do with it? So I guess for us, our biggest why, I think when it comes to the why, I do want to precede it with this, that the why has to be motivating for you, for whoever, or for parents when they choose their children's educational system, because when the rough times come, and they'll come, in the educational process, you want to make sure that your why is big enough so that when those time comes, that you can handle it, or that okay, I'm not. You don't start second guessing yourself and thinking, what am I doing?
Right.
And sometimes second guessing isn't bad, because if you are doing something that it could be improved on, of course you want to do that too. So I think probably for us, we want to make sure our sons have the best opportunities and experience, and giving them a well-rounded education, which included interaction for us with various ages and people groups.
Right.
And the big thing with that is because we noticed in education isn't about or socialization, I should say, and there's a big misconception with socialization these days, or at least in my perspective, there is. And socialization is about getting along with all ages.
Right.
It's social. It's very, it's not just with society in general, not just with 20 other classmates. So for us, we wanted to expose our kids in a way that was greater than the other options that were in front of us at the time. And so that's why we chose home education.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. That was one of the criticisms I've heard, is that there's no other situation in your life where you're forced to be in a room with other people that have birthdays within a certain range of you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, your birthday is plus or minus 6 months, so get together and solve this problem. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's not how you do it at work.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a false foundation compared to how you perform the rest of your life. And then you mentioned something about essentially how you have to be relatively committed to the idea and have a strong motivation, because there will be hard times. What are examples of some of the hard times with homeschooling? I can imagine, but what are some of the things that come to mind?
Well, probably the biggest the hardest thing is consistency.
Right.
It's being able to just keep going on, no matter what situation. I mean, life happens, and there's going to be things that happen in life. As the parents grow older, as children grow older, and as the grandparents grow older, and those things, job situations for the parents, all kinds of things happen in life. And so you want to make sure that when those things happen, it just doesn't derail everything,
Right.
and put you in neutral or in reverse to what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
So that's all kinds of things can
Yeah.
happen. Sicknesses, death, and families, whatever. So
Yeah.
job changes for a parent. There's all kinds of things like that that can happen.
Yeah. That's one of my concerns about the homeschooling is just the amount of commitment and discipline that the parents need to show to make it successful. And
Yeah,
so I think it's like you said, it's very important that anyone who wants to homeschool really has a strong understanding of the why and that will motivate them to get through the day to day, but also the special things that can discourage you, right?
right, right. But and on that, and in talking about the discussion or bad things, there's also, on the other hand, there's lots of encouraging and fun things or good things, so to speak, that come along with it. So that's in every type of education. There's you find both. But to think that it can all be bad, no, it's not. It's actually it's for us. It was very exciting. It's a lot of fun. We were able to we were free to have adventures with our sons that we never would have been able to do if they were locked into a conventional system.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and bad things can happen in every form of education, right? So you have parents who their child gets bullied, and so they pull them into a new school district, or right? So you have to, no matter what decision you make with education, you have to have some level of understanding why you made the decision and what are you going to stick with it, or are you willing to change, or so yeah,
Yeah,
fair enough.
that's very true, and that is a part. There's a lot of reasons people choose to do it, and I mean, actually, I work with a young fellow right now, and he was when he was in high school, he was I don't know if it's so much bullied, but he was so afraid in a public high school system that he was in that, I mean, he'd eat his lunch in the library,
Mm.
for fear
Wow.
of being of what could happen to him otherwise. And eventually, his parents moved him out of there, and and that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes the school system would get, sometimes they go the wrong direction. I mean, things get out of control, and it
Yep.
becomes dangerous even to the point for students. And so,
Yeah.
those are all things parents have to look at.
Okay. So you're making this decision in the mid 80s that you want to homeschool, or maybe the 90s by the time you have a
Right?
five-year. Yeah. And so
It was
then
actually it was actually the 80s, yeah,
in
about
80s.
the 80s, upper 80s, yeah.
Okay. And then at that time, was homeschooling a popular choice and were there resources?
It was becoming popular at that point. In fact, it was almost like the beginning of a new trend. And for us, we saw, not everybody, but we did we there were a few people around us, but nationally it was becoming more and more popular, and to the point that there was all kinds of things being developed for homeschoolers. I mean, when it comes to educational conventions and so forth, there was all kinds of things out there, and we found pretty easy access to resources. Because that's one of the concerns. Okay, if I decide I'm going to educate my children at home, what am I going to do? What am I going to use? And actually, for us, my wife and I both have been teachers.
Right.
Uh, we had a little bit of background.
Yeah.
Not saying that you have to. I mean, and anybody can do it that is motivated to do it. But so my wife already had some information on resources that she preferred, one over the other, and we went with a lot of. We kind of developed our own plan at first, and chose. We tried to go in and choose what we figured was the best of every option. For example, in math, we would go with one publisher as opposed to another, or in science, or whatever. And so we kind of picked and choose and developed that way for those
Okay.
resources.
So
Yeah.
in some ways, you probably customize your program a bit more than some parents, especially because you guys both had the educational background. So you had an idea of what you thought was best. You had an opinion about curriculum and how to do things.
Right. And there's a lot of things out. There's so many more options now than there were
Right.
then. In fact, actually, later on, after my four older cousins, had out of high school, and for my two youngest, we actually pretty well made a almost a one, not a 180, but we headed in the direction because there was so much more available online and using computers and so forth. Where in the early days that wasn't all available, and we actually did made some switches. Actually, we used a program called Switch On Schoolhouse, which worked very well for our youngest sons. And there were some things, like say, life changes in our family, the things that were changing the way things worked in our home. And so we found that to be very, very, very helpful and useful. So in that, I mean, we're a faith-based family coming from a Christian worldview, or we have a Christian worldview. And
Right.
so consequently, we wanted to be able to not only just educate our children, but to build character in them.
Right.
And our idea was to, because if without character, doesn't matter how much education a person has, they can fail.
Right.
And so that was a big thing for us. And no matter what we use, what system or program or resources, we wanted to have some type of faith-based
Yeah. So
goal.
that's kind of where I was going with my next question is, well, education is one thing, you learning topics, learning how to learn, but there's also, like you said, developing work ethic, developing character. There's other topics. And so for me, I mentioned this before in another podcast episode on professional development, but for me, a really important person in my own development was my first boss when I was a janitor at the school and the church. He was like 73 years old at the time, maybe. And he just had such a positive impact on me of faithfulness to his work and just being part of helping a system for many, many years, just being there to always be helpful and his patience. And so like I learned so much from him. So my question for you was like with your children, um, I think you obviously had socialization, you had ways for them to socialize with other people, even though they weren't in the classroom. Were you at all worried that with the availability of role models because they would spend majority of the day, I'm guessing, with either you or Aunt Lori, and then also you had your own company, so they started their first jobs, I think, were with you. So, did that at all worry you that you were the primary person they were looking to for their role model, or was that something that you had?
Well, well, hopefully we were good role models. I mean,
Yep. Yeah.
that's our goal. I mean, you want the best for your kids. But no, we were not. That's a good question, because that's probably the biggest question people ask. They want to know, well, how are your kids going to be able to get along with other people? How are they going to have other role models? But we had a lot of people in our life, not only family, extended family, that we saw as good role models, but other people that, either I worked with or we came in contact with, church or whether other situations that became good role models for our sons. And we're excited about it. We're involved in education. Of course, our education expanded outside of our home. I mean, we were, of course, at the time, we're socializing at a point with other people that were doing similar things, and which gave our sons opportunities pretty much worldwide. I mean, they had opportunities to visit other countries, and I mean, a lot of them still have friends that they continue to communicate with and reach out to from around the world, which is pretty. So there's a lot. I mean, and role models can be as good or bad, and
Right.
so but you want the good ones, and so it gives you a little more control on that, than for example, if a person were in a governmental system where someone else makes all those choices.
Okay. No, fair enough. Fair enough. So walking through the educational, we've got the classic, elementary, high school. In high school, they're starting to work with you, so they're learning more about, not just the classic classroom learning, but your sons were learning how to work with their hands. Your company was primarily doing exterior stucco. Is that right?
Yeah, we did. We were in general construction. We did a
Okay.
lot of stucco work and plaster work. I mean, I kind of grew up in that. My
Okay.
dad did that. I always swore I never would. So,
Yeah.
so that's what I get for swearing,
Okay.
right?
That's right.
So,
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So your sons are learning general construction, which is awesome because that's super helpful for your whole
right,
life, right? And then when they
right,
get to the point they're 18, and my understanding is that like, I don't think any of your kids went to a classic 4 years to university living in the dormitories. And I was curious because
right. Well,
you and Aunt Lori both did. So like what was your change in your perspective from when the time that you went to college to the time that your children are ready to go to college?
actually, one of our sons did. Connor.
Um,
He went to university, and I mean, his little was 4 years is less because he was able to do an accelerated program, which was beneficial for him, and he wanted to get a degree in business, and which he's using now with his. He works for a big insurance company, and so the others are we didn't necessarily. I don't want to say we didn't discourage them from going on to university if they wanted to, but we wanted them to do what they wanted to do. And we wanted to make sure that their goals, or their education, was lined up with their goals. And some things, I mean. If you're going to be an engineer, you need a college education,
sure, sure.
or a doctor, you need all those credentials. Some other things, you're better equipped in other ways. And not to say that, I mean, I look at some of the courses I took in college, I've been happy to skip them. So haven't thought about them since, but I paid for them. So if I could have taken something else that I'd use more today, I'd been happier for the money to go that way. But
Yeah, yeah,
so it depends on their goals, their life goals, and so and so that pretty much is the way that went.
right.
It's just pretty much individually, what their goals, their aspirations are, and we wanted to work with them, whatever that was. I mean, about some of them involve apprentice, others involve other types of education that they get outside of university, but still not necessarily classroom, but of course today is so different. There's so much available online. I mean,
Right.
a person can get a lot of education sitting in front of a computer, and
Incredible.
which, yeah, and it's amazing, even financially, how helpful it is, for families to be able to do that at a lesser cost. Because unfortunately, as we see politically, it's like one of the big things is how do we get these kids up underneath their college debt?
Right.
I've met. It's too bad, but I've met people that they're in their 30s and 40s and they still have a huge,
Right.
college debt, and but I mean that's another whole aspect, another
Yeah.
topic.
No, but that's interesting how so essentially that idea of wanting the best for your children and wanting to get them to the point where they can decide where they want to go. That was central throughout all the education. And then when it got to college, it wasn't any different. It wasn't force something on them. It was how do we
Right.
facilitate you to make the decision that's best for you? And so that looked a little bit different for each one of your kids, I suppose.
Right. It pretty much is. And as you know, I mean, from your own siblings, you know how different you all are, different aspirations, different things. And it's all good, It's like, to me, it's whatever is in their heart, that they, so to speak, been created for us, they
Yeah.
need to run with that.
Yeah.
And it's easier to run with something that you like than it's
Yeah.
somebody trying to make you do, So,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
so I guess to kind of close this out, if we think about the different people in Argentina or different people in the audience who might be interested in homeschooling. So people who have international families, people in Argentina perhaps who are going to be maybe in the future allowed to have more homeschooling options, traveling families. Like I think you touched on some of these things, but what would be any final takeaways to trying to make education successful if you step away from maybe the tried and true classical ways, yeah?
Right. We have kind of touched on a few things. I think the biggest thing is having purpose and knowing, what you want for your kids. You got to have that why, as we talked about. But and then I think the thing is do get counsel, and I mean some counsel you'll like, some you won't. I mean for people that are interested in this, and you're gonna, and unfortunately whenever you do something that's not normal, so to speak, you know. And I mean, and it was for us too that people ask a lot of questions. You got to be ready for that.
Okay.
And why are you doing this, you know? And so you got to be ready for some of that. And for us, you know, understanding and being able to tell other people, you know, when we were home educating, they would immediately think, what in the world are you doing? You know, maybe that's what they're thinking if they're so used to what the past. But it's fun and it's neat to be able to realize that no matter what the educational background, there's some great people who have come out of all of them. And some things that a lot of people don't realize. I mean, Abraham Lincoln, the president of the United States, was home educated.
Right.
Sandra Day O'Connor, who was a Supreme Court justice, was home educated.
Right.
Uh, uh, Thomas Edison, I don't remember exactly, fifth or sixth grade, you know, 10 or 12, 10 or 11 years old. His teacher told his mother, "This kid is an imbecile and he cannot be educated. You know, you need to take him home." And so his mother started teaching him at home. Well, I'm glad she did because I sure enjoy switching on my light. So, and so you know, it's interesting to see, you know, what can be. We have a good friend who was home educated. He went on to he went on then to college. So he went to Northwestern University in Chicago, and he graduated top of his class. He was yeah, in law school, and then he wound up being assistant to the Supreme Court Justice in Washington D.C. and lived there for several years with his family. Moved back to Chicago, worked for a very prestigious law firm, and now he's a district court judge in the
Wow.
state of Illinois. And so, you know, very successful.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one story, but his education started out at home. But and you can change. You know, that's the thing too. You know, a person can be home educated through the first, you know, 8 years or whatever, and still go on and go into a system of higher education. That's always an option. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't mean it's a sentence or something. It is.
Right.
It's just a tool to be used to get through that part of life,
Right.
and
Right.
it can change. Yeah, and
But
there's nothing wrong with change. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. But the principles of understanding what you want for your children, how you're going to do it, why you're doing it, right? Like
Right.
those are universal principles, and perhaps the outcome or the decision looks a little different for each family. But like the period of time that we have with our children in the formative years is really small when you look at the entirety of life, right? And it sets that
It,
foundation for the rest of their life, right? And for the next generations. And so I think, just like, my son is 4 now. He just turned 4 last month. And it's fast, it's fast.
wow.
And he's going to be 18 before I know it, right?
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
definitely, I'm in those moments now where I'm thinking about that more often. But I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your experiences, not with me, but also with anyone who in the audience who can listen.
Hey, we really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. Best
Awesome.
wishes to all of you. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Uncle Matt. I really appreciate it.